So in the past, I've had a number of questions regarding how do I sharpen all of my how I sharpen my plane blades. So I have this little block plane here that I restored a few months ago, and the blade has since gotten pretty dull. So I thought I'd make this video and show you the process on how I sharpen my blades. So to me, it seems like every guy and their mother has an opinion on how they should sharpen a plane blade. So what I like to use is just some good old wet and dry sandpaper. I've used this since I first started sharpening all of my plane blades and chisels and all of those types of woodworking tools. So the main grits that you need, for me, this is what I've found to be the best, is a 400, a 600, an 800, and if you really want, you can go up to 1200. Anything more than this, other than a polishing, really doesn't make the blade perform any better than a blade that's sharpened to one of these grits. So these are really the main four, and if you just restored a tool and you haven't actually had a good edge on the blade, you might need to reinitialize the blade, and for that you could easily just use a little bit coarser sandpaper, maybe a 320 or even a 220 if it is that dull. But for most of us who are just needing to sharpen up a blade and not go through the entire process, you probably wouldn't need to use this. And one thing you might find is maybe your blade isn't really all that dull and you don't need to go through all of the grits. You might need to only do the top two. It is really up to you on how often you should sharpen your blade, depending on how often you use the plane, obviously. So for actually sharpening the blade, I like to use a piece of glass that I know is dead flat. This was actually from an old refrigerator that my family had. It was one of the shelves inside there. Now, if you don't have a piece of glass, you could always use like a piece of granite or pretty much just anything you know that is dead flat. One thing I would not recommend is using your table saw, because when you have this sandpaper sitting on the table saw and you're working with your blades and stuff, that can actually scratch the top of your cast iron table saw. So I would not recommend that, even though it is flat. So like this piece of glass right here, I don't know if you can tell, but it's gotten pretty scuffed up in some spots, and I'm okay with that. Yeah, that's just something you want to keep in mind. So before you go type your comment, let me just first say, I know that the sandpaper and this wet and dry sandpaper isn't the most efficient way. I will probably upgrade in the next couple months to a set of diamond stones. I know a number of YouTubers that have they're actually the size of this pretty much, and it just has the 3 different grits, and I'll probably upgrade to that eventually. Yeah, those are pretty pricey. I'm not exactly sure when I'm going to get those. I probably will soon, but before you tell me I should go out and get those, I am aware, and I will probably upgrade to those soon. So we can just line this up on the edge of the bench, just like that. Take our sandpaper right here, and I just use a small piece of wood, and we can just grab a clamp, just tighten this piece of wood down. So to carry away the shavings from the blade, I just use Windex. You could use any other glass cleaner or even water. One thing you want to make sure though is that you don't let it sit on the blade or any of the other parts, because that could make it rust. So we can just spray a little bit underneath first and then the top. So when you first sharpen the blade for the very first time, you want to make sure that the back of the bottom of the blade is up to the highest grit that you sharpen to. For me, it's around 1200, like this right here. What I do is I first sharpen this edge right here, and then just to knock off the burr on the bottom end, because this is already up to the highest grit, I just knock it off like that with one stroke, and that is what I do. I hardly ever touch this back face. So all of your blades are going to vary in length as well as the width. And for me, what I like personally is 30 degrees on the bevel. There are many people who say 25 degrees. You should go 27.938 degrees. It really does not matter where you go, just somewhere in that ballpark and you'll be fine. Obviously, the steeper the bevel angle, the more durable the edge is. Obviously, I'm not busting through hard knots with my plane blades, so that's why I like to go 30 degrees. So when you first put the edge onto the sandpaper, you want to feel for the edge. You'll feel a flat spot in there, and that is where you want to hold the angle. And then you just pull back, keeping that angle. Try not to dip down or up too much. Just feel for that edge every time. Don't get in a rush. And long strokes across the whole piece of sandpaper. Sandpaper is expensive, so you want to get your money's worth, right? And what you'll find is you'll feel a burr on the back edge of the blade. Obviously, you don't want to cut yourself doing this, but just push forward like this and try and feel for that burr. If you don't feel it, you can then go back and feel for that burr after a few more strokes. So I'll try to show this the best I can, but if I bring my finger just on the edge, I think you can see that burr on the very edge. It's almost like a white, really thin line on the edge of the blade. That is the burr, and when you push it in this direction, flat against the sandpaper or the stone or whatever you have, it should knock that off. So the last step in sharpening the blade is by laying it perfectly flat and just give it one pull back like that. That should knock that burr off there. And if it rolled up onto the front, and in that case you just want to take another stroke in this direction like we were just doing, and then go back like this, and that should knock the burr off and give you a nice sharp edge. So you don't believe me? Let me show you how sharp it is. I'll shave some hair off of my arm right here, and I'll just show you how sharp this thing is. Can you see all that hair that's on there? With just a few sheets of sandpaper of different grits and a bulb patch on your arm, you'd be able to get a pretty sharp plane blade. And one last thing you want to do once the blade is completely sharp is just knock off the very corners of the blade. So by knocking off these two corners right there, that will just prevent any ridges on your piece of wood when you're planing. Now we can just match up this little ridge right here with these ridges and put the blade in. You can see that nice Stanley logo in there. And to set the blade properly inside the plane, you just want to take a thin piece of wood, put it in your vise. So what you're going to do is take a pass on each side, and once you have the same thickness shaving on each side, so those two shavings that I took are pretty much identical in thickness. I didn't feel one side being heavier than the other, and that lets you know that your plane is now running good. So setting the lateral adjustment on the plane is different from a block plane to like a plane like this. So on a block plane, you have to actually knock, like with a rubber tip of some sort, you actually have to knock the blade on each side in order to make it sit in there properly. And that is different from a plane like this, because on this type of plane, you actually have a lateral adjustment lever that you move to either side to adjust the blade on one side or the other. So that is how I sharpen and set up my plane blades. Like I said, everybody has an opinion on how you should sharpen a blade, and this is just the way that I do it. There were many of you that asked how I sharpen my blades, and this is how I do it, and that's really it. So if you do choose to share your method of sharpening a blade in the comments, if I may ask, please do so kindly, and please don't be mean to other people. Everyone has their opinion, and there are many different ways to sharpen a plane. So that is going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, I'd love to have you subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Also, like I said, if you have anything to say or you have a different method of sharpening the plane, leave that down in the comments. And also, if I could ask, please go down and hit that like button, guys. I really do appreciate that. That really helps me out. Also, I do have an Instagram account if you'd like to go follow me. that would be really great. I do share stuff on there that isn't going to make it into videos. So if you'd like to keep up with that, definitely go over and follow me. So yeah, that is pretty much it for this one, and I will see you guys in the next video.